In the aftermath of World War II, the Allied occupation of Japan had two major objectives. One was to rebuild Japan's economy, and the other was to mold Japan into a capitalist counterbalance against rising communist forces in East Asia. While early efforts laid the groundwork, Japan's true rebirth occurred at the dawn of the Korean War. With the US military stationed nearby and in constant need of supplies, Japan was the obvious choice as a supply base and logistics hub for the war. This gave the Japanese economy the jumpstart it needed, and the nation rapidly re-industrialized. As prosperity grew, memories of Japan's imperial past were quickly washed away by investor-friendly sentiment. This, in turn, kicked off what is now called the Japanese economic miracle, marked by rapid and sustained growth, ensuring that Japan would remain firmly in the capitalist camp. At the same time, the post-war American economy had developed a great hunger for consumer products, mainly due to its strong middle class, but especially the baby boom. With a horde of youngsters comes a desire for toys. Japan, eager to put its people to work, quickly took advantage of this new demand and became America's toy maker for the next 20 years following World War II. The Japanese initially simply produced American and other Western-designed toys. However, they eventually learned how to make their own designs that matched or exceeded the quality of their Western counterparts. To this day, Japanese designers are known for their creative and high-quality products in a range of different industries. Additionally, with the introduction of modern plastics as well as battery components, the complexity of these toys could be heightened without major additional costs. Also happening in the post-war period was the boom of toy and model trains. Then-current brands like Lionel, Marx, Mantua, and Gilbert arguably helped to mold the world of model railroading that we know today. Japanese firms were quick to notice this trend and came out with a number of sets that drew on these popular lines. One of these companies was Nomura, a tin toy manufacturer. Nomura created a number of different toy trains, but most interestingly to me, they created a very obscure line of HO gauge trains that few talk about today. Almost all of these came in train sets with identical cars, accessories, and always used a battery pack for power. These releases have a host of unusual and quirky design traits, but above all, one stands out as truly obscure, obtuse, and nearly forgotten. In this video, we'll be taking a closer look at Nomura's so-called Deluxe steam locomotive. I found my example on eBay for a clean $30 with the original box and cars. Unfortunately, the seller used said original box as the only line of protection against the perils of USPS. When it arrived, it was not a pretty sight to say the least. The motor had somehow come loose from the chassis and the steam chest had snapped in half. Thankfully though, the seller gave me a partial refund, but the damage was still pretty disappointing. Since the locomotive had already disassembled itself in shipping, I could get right to servicing the thing. I found it interesting that this cheap toy-grade engine from the 1960s has a can motor. I know it's not a modern can motor, but like all can motors, it has a casing which has kept it clean over the past 60 years, meaning it took very little effort to get it actually going. It makes me wonder why many other manufacturers of the era were so slow to adopt them. It also had some gunk on the outside, which was promptly removed with some Goo Gone. Next was the chassis, which was really interesting to me in terms of design. Nomura's tinplate toy roots really show through on this locomotive, as it has lithographed wheels, stamped metal gears and side rods, as well as bent tab construction. What's also neat is the smoke unit, which has this unique accordion-style pump that pushes air into a heating chamber that then pushes the air out the top. A very intricate feature for what is meant to be just a cheap toy. Disassembly was pretty simple. There were 3 screws on the retainer plate which allowed it to come up and slide off the brass pickups. After taking out the wheels, you could really see all the glorious gunk that had built up on this thing over the past 60 years. When there's gunk, Goo Gone is your friend, so I proceeded to scrub every nook and cranny of this chassis until my hands didn't get grubby from picking it up. After the chassis was firmly ungunked, I refitted the motor with a spare screw I had in my parts box. Some brief testing showed that the engine was full of life. Next up were the wheels. They had a bit of gunk on them, nothing the infinite power of Goo Gone couldn't solve. Interestingly, the wheels had some flash left on them from the casting process, so I carefully filed them down and they were good to go. After reinstalling the wheels and then oiling everything, I again tested the engine and it was clear this thing was just dying to get running. Before that could happen though, I had to address the steam chest, which was still broken. I considered various options on how to fix it before finally just choosing Gorilla Glue, which turned out perfectly. After resoldering the wires, I could finally give the locomotive its first true test, and as you can see, it sprung right to life. I also took this opportunity to test the smoke unit, however, it unfortunately did not smoke despite my best efforts. Perhaps another day I'll come back to it. After cleaning the shell and tender, I reassembled everything and let the locomotive finally hit the track. As you can see, it had absolutely no hesitation and it took right off. The only blatant issue with Nomura's Deluxe steam locomotive is that the flanges are pretty large, even for Code 100, meaning sometimes it clips the track, as you can see here. Something else to consider is the unique coupling system, and with that in mind, the tall flanges again, because that makes this locomotive pretty much unusable on most layouts. Although it is worth noting that these couplers do kind of work with other similar hook and loop systems. If you're looking to acquire one of these engines, I'd pass you a word of caution. For some reason, eBay seems to think that these are cast from pure gold, and I often see them listed for just absurd prices. Please, if you want one, do not pay more than $30. They're not that valuable or rare, and you will be disappointed. I'd recommend just waiting for a lower price or checking your next train show. One last interesting observation, I noticed that the caboose and boxcar from this set are clearly bootlegs of the old Athearn Blue Box molds. I wonder how they got those. To conclude, the Nomura Deluxe steam locomotive is a fine example of Japanese toy craftsmanship. Although it's a fairly unrealistic, out-of-scale, and overall odd-looking engine, its charming classic aesthetic, clever engineering, and strong running makes it a very enjoyable locomotive. If you have any questions, thoughts, or suggestions, please let me know. Your feedback is very important and it helps me improve my videos significantly. Besides that, I'm Tomas, and thanks for watching the Big Little Works channel.